Hi and welcome. You are tuning into another episode of the Two Charlottes Spill the Tea. And today we want to talk mainly about fear and the fear factor. I'm also going to actually just be handing you straight over to the lovely Charlotte, and she's going to tell us a part of her life journey where fear was a motivating part of her life.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, that's what we're going to talk about today. And it's not it's not a hard topic for me to really talk about anymore, but it is something that I'm quite nervous about. So bear with me if I kind of stumble over my words a little bit. But so we're gonna, yeah, talk about fear and pushing through the fear blocks when it comes to personal growth. And for me, the biggest kind of fear block, or not fear block, but hurdle I had to get over was when I went through my addiction recovery. So a lot of people that know me know that I used to have a drug addiction. I'm now 15 years clean from drugs, which is awesome. Um, but that was obviously a long road, a long process. The last few years have been a hell of a lot easier than the beginning. But that was obviously, a time in my life where there was a lot of fear around that. So I thought it'd be quite good to just get it out there and talk about it on this week's podcast. So I'll start off by kind of going all the way back to the beginning. I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty really, but just to kind of give you a little bit of context into, how we got there, why we got there, and, where it all stemmed from. So, back like previous episode, we spoke about obviously, when you're a teenager, the things that you do to make friends and fit in and be seen and liked and have people think you're cool. And, for me, that was, kind of dabbling in drugs and smoking and drinking. And, that was just the thing that you did because all of your friends were, and it seemed like an awesome thing to do at the time, and we had a great time. Like I'm not gonna lie, we had some really good, some good times. I'm not condoning behavior, but it was fun at the beginning. um and then after that, obviously, I then got pregnant with Grace when I was 18. So during the pregnancy, I didn't do anything. Like, there was, I didn't even take my medication for my bipolar at that point. So I wasn't doing anything like that when I was pregnant. But after I had Grace, it was kind of when it all went a little bit downhill. Like, obviously it was great because we had Grace and she was amazing, but I left her dad very shortly after she was born, and then moved back in with my mum. And then it was a case of having to try and, juggle being a single mum. I had to get myself my own house. And then I was, doing all these things that I've never kind of done before. But at that point, I was also unmedicated for my mental health and suffering with what I didn't know at the time, but suffering with quite severe postpartum depression. And I didn't really know I was experiencing those things. I just thought this is what it was like to be a single parent. And, as much as I had my mum around me, and like people around, I was very much felt like I was on my own. I didn't know what I was doing half the time because I was 19 with a baby. Um, and yeah, didn't really know what I was doing. So when I moved into my own house and I was setting up and trying to kind of set up a life for Grace, that's when I lost control completely. So I started taking drugs again because I knew, like, well, I didn't know. I felt like I was better when I was on them because I didn't feel any of the stuff I felt before. Wasn't feeling alone or scared or struggling with my mental health because I was just, taking all of these uppers, which just make you feel great. Like, you feel like you're on cloud nine all the time. And so it didn't matter. I didn't have to face up to any of the stuff I'd put into little boxes that I didn't have to deal with. So it felt like I was just managing and coping. And then it just escalated, over the course of a year, year and a half. It just escalated and went from bad to worse. It went from being, having a little bit here and there to needing it to actually function. And that's one thing that I didn't, until I went through the recovery process, I didn't actually class myself as being an addict until I went through it the other side. Because it was then when you're like, okay, yeah, I actually needed to get out of bed. That's when I'm like, okay, then I knew that I had a problem, and it just was getting worse and worse and worse. And in the end, I ended up losing custody of Grace and having to move into a mother and baby hostel, but without a baby. That's a that's a whole different story. We'll talk about that on a different day. But um, so that's kind of how we got there. That's like, and probably that was probably like the worst point of my life at that point, where I'm in this hostel, I don't have Grace, and I'm like, now what do I do? What?
Must have been really upsetting for you.
Yeah, it was like, it was a really dark time, I won't lie. And, I didn't really have any other choice, but I had to get clean. There was like, as much as all I wanted to do, and until I kind of got to that realization point of this is what I have to do, then all I did do was just do a hell of a lot more drugs because Grace had been taken at that point. So I was like, well, what's the point? Let's just numb all these feelings down.
Yeah.
So when I kind of got to that headspace of being like, right, I need to get clean. I have no other option. If I want to have a relationship with my child, I have to do it. That's where the fear comes in. Like, that was quite possibly one of the scariest things I had to actually do. And it took me a while to be able to do it. I was in the hostel and I was going through all the process with social services and courts. And at this point, Grace was with her dad, and I was going through all of that stuff, and I couldn't seem to, you know, get there. Like, I couldn't seem to just get clean because every time I thought about it, it was too scary. And that's why it did take me a while. Like, I will hold my hands up. It took me a good few months after she was removed for me to actually sit down and take a look at myself and be like, sort your shit out, Charlotte. It's about time we got a handle on it. So yeah, I relapsed a lot. Like, I would get clean for a week or two and then relapse again. And I'm not saying that it's like, when it comes to addiction, it's nobody's fault. Like, I'm the one that chose to do it, but I definitely wasn't surrounded by the right people at that point. So there was a lot of people I was still around that made it a lot harder. Um, but yeah, so once I kind of got to that point, it's like, yeah, that's when you have to sit there and really sit with the fear of what I'm about to do. And for me, it was the fear of feeling everything. Because if, for anyone that's ever gone through, a detox and gone through recovery, you'll know that you go from being able to just numb everything you feel. And if you're having a bad day, you can, take something or smoke something or drink something, and you don't feel it anymore. And for that split second or those few hours or however long you're using, you feel on top of the world. Everything feels fine. And that was the biggest thing I was scared of. Like, I was scared of having to feel everything because I had spent consistently at this point nearly 2 years numbing everything I felt. Um, but I had to, like, I had to look at it and say, what's the alternative? The alternative is I carry on the way that I'm going and I absolutely lose everything. I was already on the verge of losing everything. So if I didn't make this change and didn't just step into the scary part of things, I was going to lose everything. Um, but it was, it's the feeling everything, but it's facing up to what you've actually done. Because in that point, I then had to face up to the fact that I completely failed as a parent and I let my child down because I let my mental health get so bad. I didn't look after myself enough that it meant I couldn't look after her anymore. And that was something that took a long time for me to be like, yeah, I did that. Um, and then obviously, yeah, facing up to the consequences of what happens after that. Like, it was years and years of battling to kind of, undo all of the damage. Like Grace is back home now, but she came back home when she was 14. You know, she went to her dad when she was 18 months old. Like that's a long time. There's a lot of reasons for that. Like one of the main reasons was when I actually did get my act together, she was in school. She was settled, she was happy, she had a routine, she was in her first primary school. So I didn't want to uproot her life, which is why I never tried to, because from what I was being told, she was doing really well, she was thriving, she was happy. So who was I to kind of swoop in and be like, well, I can be a mum now, so it's time to uproot your life.
I was just going to say that, did you feel like perhaps you had some guilt still, for going through it, or that you just felt like you couldn't come in and be that mum right then?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I couldn't just, it would have been selfish of me
Yeah.
to decide it's been, 3 years. I'm stable now. I have a house, I have a job, I can be your mum. Like that would be really selfish of me to do that. So I didn't, which is
I think
one of the
that
big
in
reasons.
its own shows the level of growth that you must have already reached at that point to have those kind of thoughts as well.
Which, I really appreciate you saying that, because it's something that I don't always feel that way. And like a lot of
Yeah.
people say to me, oh, you've overcome so much, it's this, it's that. And I sit there and I'm like, you're not talking about me, surely. Like, surely not. Like, even now I'm sat there like, oh, I really appreciate that. But then I'm like, did I really do that?
But no, I think that, a lot of people come in and out of their kids' lives. When you look at addiction and things like that, you see a lot of people that come in and out of their kids' lives, and they come back in after a couple of years, but then they become addicted again, and they're back out of their lives and in and out. But to me, it seems like, everything you've done, like looking at it from the outside in, it looks like you've spent, a long time building yourself back up to be the kind of mom that you always were able to be, and that you always wanted to be. And you have your two girls with you now, and it's like full circle. It's just a completely different person to the scared girl that you used to be back then.
What, yeah, 100%. And I think, I think a lot of the journey had to happen, because if it didn't happen the way that it did, we wouldn't potentially be where we're at with it now. And, that's, as much as I would love to have just swooped back in as soon as I had, got myself clean and got a job and stabilized myself, I didn't want to be that parent that swooped in and out all the time. I didn't want to just, I didn't want to let her down again, I think was another thing. I think that's also another, like, I was scared of getting her back and messing up again,
Yeah.
because I'd messed up so bad before.
Yeah, that's very understandable though.
So yeah, I'm trying to stay on track, but I feel like I've just deviated massively. This is why I did write notes for this podcast. Normally we just kind of wing it, but I did write notes for this exact reason.
Wise woman.
So yeah, so obviously going through the recovery process for me, the biggest thing was just feeling everything. And I had, I did have people around me, but I had pushed so many people away. Like some people I had to, there was a lot of my friends that I had to disconnect from. And if, I hadn't had this push from my support worker at the time to cut those people off, I don't think I would have done. But doing that was probably one of the best things I could have done for myself. Um, but there was a lot of people that I had pushed away that I probably shouldn't have done. There were good friends that I had alienated. There was my family who, were around, but nobody really fully understood why this was even happening. And, I would I'd love to sit here and go into like huge detail about all these different things, but I feel like I've kind of summarized enough as to why I did it. But because of that, I pushed a lot of people away. So I was like, I need to rebuild those relationships. And that was also really scary, like trying to kind of rebuild relationships with your family again when they're so mad at you. Like they were so mad. Like, my mum still loved me, but she was so mad and
I
so
think
disappointed.
I think that's something that a lot of people don't really talk about as well when it comes to something like recovery. How hard it is to make amends with family members. I
Yeah.
mean, it can actually take years as well
Yeah,
to build that trust
100%.
back up.
And I think it did take a long time really, with my family to be okay with it and to trust that I'm not gonna slip back into old ways and that I'm not still doing, all this reckless stuff because, I was so good at covering up what I was doing. I think that's like the thing, because when you're an addict, you also become a professional liar. Like you become really, really good at lying to the people around you about what you're doing and how bad it is. And in a way, that actually came in really handy because during my detox, I had to lie about how bad it was because I was dealing with social services, court hearings, and all of this kind of stuff. Like, detox was horrendous. It was so horrible that like I can't even describe it. Like the only way to describe what the detox was like is it felt like my skin was on fire all the time. Like but I couldn't let anybody really know how bad it was. Like my mental health was all over the place. It was just shot to pieces as you go through the ups and downs of detoxing and withdrawing from all manner of drugs I was taking, but I couldn't tell anybody how bad it was because the people I lived with in the hostel, they were support workers. They were speaking to my social workers. So I couldn't tell them how bad I felt and how low I was. I had to just pretend, yeah, yeah, I'm feeling great today. Yeah, but today's a new day. Everything's great. And then when the social workers would come round, I'd be like, yeah, my recovery's going really well. Everything's great. I'm feeling really good, even when actually at multiple times I'd sit with the social worker, I'd feel like I was going to throw up in her lap because I felt so awful, but I had to pretend I was fine because heaven forbid they would potentially write down on my notes that, oh, well, she's not coping with detox very well. And I just thought it was going to go against me,
Yeah,
even though it probably wouldn't have because they want you to be honest and they understand the process. In my head, I was like, nope, they have to think I'm absolutely squeaky clean perfect. Otherwise, I've got no chance in this situation.
it's crazy what a lack of understanding between people can bring about. I mean, that definitely would have made your detox 100 times harder to go through because the support that you should have had for even your physical well-being as well, you didn't feel that you could have that support without it, being detrimental to your whole reason for going through recovery in the first place.
Exactly. And I didn't want to do anything that was going to jeopardize that situation because that's the whole reason I'm putting myself through this. The whole
Yeah,
reason that I'm feeling this way and facing these fears and going to therapy and unboxing all the stuff that I've been trying to numb with drugs. The whole point of doing all of that was so that I would get access to Grace
to Grace
and
again.
I'd still have her in my life in one
Mm,
way or another, whatever that looked like. But there was such a fear of them saying, oh, she's not coped with it very well. I don't think we can let her see Grace yet. Or she still needs supervised access because she's,
yeah.
not dealing with detox very well. And to be honest, like the more and more I think about it, I think that's probably why it took so long after the detox process for me to actually get a handle on my mental health properly
Oh
because
yeah.
I was kind of like kidding myself that I was fine and telling all the doctors, yeah, no, I'm great. The meds are working perfectly. That's absolutely fantastic. Like, I was, yeah, probably kind of faking it even to myself a little bit until later
Yeah.
down the line when actually I was like, no, there's still so much stuff we have to unbox here, so let's go back to therapy. Um, but because of that fear of them saying that I couldn't cope, or of them pulling the rug out from under me again. Um, and I don't think it helped. Like, obviously, I have nothing against social services. I think they do some really good work where they can. I think the system is broken. However, I did have a biased social worker.
Yeah.
And because of that, I was definitely very scared of what she was going to write. Everything I said was and analyzed slightly incorrectly sometimes. So there was a
Yeah.
big, like, fear there that she was the one person standing between me and unsupervised access to my child. And she could be the one that's like, no, I'm not going to grant it. So that made that process a lot harder.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And, after that, like, it took a long time to obviously be able to kind of trust anyone when it came to anything to do with Grace. And that could have also potentially been another reason why I didn't want to open those old wounds years down the line when I knew I was in a position. As much as I knew I didn't want to upset her life, there probably was a little bit of kind of PTSD there that I didn't want to
I
open
wouldn't
up
be
a social
surprised.
worker.
Yeah.
I didn't want
End
to
up with
let
the same
someone in.
woman back again.
Exactly. That was a
Oh,
big, a big thing. So, um, but yeah, as much as, though, as much as my, like, having to go through the recovery and go through the, being an addict and losing Grace and all of the horrible things that happened, I genuinely think it was the worst thing, but also the best thing that I could have gone through, because it
yeah.
definitely gave me, like, perspective on a lot of things.
Yeah.
And it's made me an incredibly strong person because of pushing through the fear. And
I can imagine the amount of mental strength that you must have had to not only be a teenage parent, to not only have mental health issues, to not only be going through a recovery, but to do all of that and to come out of it like you have is so commendable. I mean, it's such an accomplishment and achievement, and it speaks volumes to the kind of character that you have as a person and the resilience and the mental strength. And it really does, because addiction is people can struggle for years with
mm,
addiction, and then becoming a teenage mother, it's not easy, especially not when it happened back when we were teenagers. And to go through all of that, dealing with your own mental health problems as well, it really does speak to the character of you, to how well you have managed to do all of that and to be here able to use your experiences to help other people, years later, and be able to speak about it quite openly. It's just, I'm in awe of that, really. I take my hat off to you, because it's an incredible thing to do, to change your negatives into positives to help other people as well.
and it's, and I really appreciate that. And it wasn't easy. Like, it sounds really easy when I sit here and talk about it now, like 15 years later, like, or it sounds so easy that, I just decided one day that I was going to get clean and I was going to face this. But genuinely, it was probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, other than processing, like, the loss of my dad. I think this was definitely one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Like, addiction is so messy and it's so awkward for so many people. And like you said, so many people go in and out of it for years and years. And I think I probably would have been one of those people if it wasn't for Grace. Because knowing I had her, and I needed her to be proud of me, and I needed her to be like an adult that can, look, like, when somebody talks to you about your your mum or your dad, like you want to be able to reel off all these like amazing things. Oh, my mum's this, my mum's that. Like I didn't want her to be like, yeah, my mum's an addict. I haven't seen her since I was 5. She's dropped in and out of my life. Like she's never been able to get clean or get stable. Like I've never been able to live with her because it's of this and this. Like I didn't want that. Like I wanted her to be like, yeah, my mum was an addict when I was a baby, but guess what? She's now this, and this, and doing all these amazing things, and using her trauma to help people and using her past experiences to help people. And I think if it wasn't for like, it sounds really bad, but the fear of what other people were going to think of me as a parent, I think was the only thing that like kept me going. To be like, no, 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 I can't have people think I failed. I can't have anyone think I failed as a parent.
Yeah,
Um, so, and I think, that obviously rolls into the episode we spoke about last week with how, we do a lot of things because we just want people to like us and people to see us in a certain way. But
it's true.
I couldn't have people think I failed when it came to Grace, whether
Do
or
you
not.
think that part of that stems from being such a young parent? Because I don't know about you, but I certainly felt as a young parent that everyone expected me to fail.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Like nowadays, it's it's more common for there to
Yeah,
be, people having kids in their teens. And,
yeah,
there was, when I was in the mother and baby hostel, there was a girl in there who was 15 with a baby, and she was still like smashing her GCSEs and going to school with a baby. Like, so it is completely possible to be a young mum and still be thriving in life, but it
yeah.
definitely wasn't the way people looked at it when I was 18 and pregnant.
No,
It
it was very taboo.
Yeah, it was very, and I was actually like, because 18, you are technically an adult at 18, but it was still very much, even though people wouldn't say it to me, I think they were definitely thinking, this is going to ruin her life. She's not going to be able to cope. She won't be able to do it. And there was definitely a lot of, yeah, like stigma around teenage mums. And it was made worse by the fact I was a teenage mum that then became a single mum because I left Grace's dad. So it wasn't even the case of being like, well, they're young, but they're together and they're happy and they're stable and blah, blah, blah. Nope, I was a single mum. So I just made it worse for myself. And I think that was, but in a way, like it sounds bad, but I think it did, I think it fueled the motivation to be like, no, I have to do it. Like I have to do this. I have to push through because I can't just be another statistic of being a single parent.
Yeah, absolutely. And you really managed that.
And like I think I did a pretty good job. It took me a while, don't get me wrong, it took a while. Grace was in primary school by the time I could really kind of hold my hands up and say, yeah, I'm completely stable. I'm completely clean. I'm like, I'm good. I'm solid. I've got a job now. Like, I have my own house again. It took a long time, but I think anything worth having takes time. Nothing worth having happens overnight. And
Absolutely.
as much as it was terrifying to face the fact I was going to have to be, you know, completely like demystify my brain and actually like be present in the moment with all those horrible thoughts that were going around my head and all the horrible feelings that you have. It was, yeah, probably like the best thing I could ever do. And as much as if I had the opportunity to go back and do it again, I probably wouldn't do it so badly, but I wouldn't want to be like, no, I would never do that. If I got my chance
Yeah.
again, I wouldn't, because it taught me so much and I learned so much about who I am. And I met some really great people along the way of my recovery that actually I wouldn't change any of that. So,
Yeah.
as
It's
much as,
funny, isn't it, how you can look back like at the time when you were going through it, you probably wished for your life to be anything but what it was right there
Mm.
and then in that moment. But then when you look back over it all, you're like, no, I wouldn't change that at all, because I'm who I am today because of those struggles,
Yeah,
because of what I had to learn.
100%. Like, yeah, when you're in that moment, when I was sat in that hostel, like going through detox, feeling like my skin was on fire and I wanted to be sick all the time, terrified of what was going to happen and how I was ever
Probably
going to
feeling
be
very
able.
alone as well.
Yeah, like as much as I lived in a house with six other girls, but they all had kids. And I had I had friends and I had my family, but honestly, I've never felt more alone in that moment. And
Yeah,
I would just sit there and think, God, I wish I had a different life. Like, I wish this
yeah.
was not the life I was living. But now I wouldn't change it because I had to go through that to become who I am now. And all the people I now have in my life and all the people I've met along the road, I probably wouldn't have met if
If you didn't go through that,
no.
you would literally be living a fully different life right now.
I can't even imagine, like, you know, if I hadn't gone through all of that stuff, I may still have Grace, but I probably wouldn't have Darcy
Mm,
because I wouldn't have met her dad if I hadn't met all the people along the way that led me to him that meant that we had Darcy. So,
yeah,
I wouldn't change any of it. And I wouldn't change any of the like, which is going to sound so crazy. And anybody who is sat currently in their like recovery phase or in their detox is probably going to be like, she's insane. But I wouldn't change any of the bad stuff that's happened to me, like any of it, because it genuinely made me who I am.
yeah, yeah. And you know what? I think that that speaks of someone who's really learnt a lot and is in a place right now where they're just really loving the person that they are and the life that they have.
Yeah.
Because if you didn't, you wouldn't want to change anything. So I think if anyone that's an addict is listening to this and hears you say that, to know that you can look back on your life and say, no, I'm glad for all of that stuff, because look at me now. It just goes to show that there is a lot of light at the end of that tunnel.
Oh, there absolutely is, and it does get better. Like,
Yeah,
I one thing that I had to keep saying to myself through all of the like process to get to where we are now is there has to be something better. Like, and I had to keep reminding myself that there has to be something better. There has to be more than there is now. And if you're in that place now, like it's okay. Like it does get better because I am like living, breathing proof that you can go from basically destroying your entire life to rebuilding it again. And it takes time and it takes work and it's
mm,
painful and it's messy and it's not always comfortable, but it's definitely worth it. And it's really rewarding at the end when you get to that point where you're like, because now Grace is home, I kind of feel like that whole journey is done. Like, because
yeah,
the whole point, the whole reason I did all of this was for her to come home. Like, that was the whole point. Like, the only reason that I pulled myself out of it was because I needed to be better for her. So, her now being back here, granted, the circumstances around that I didn't really have much control over, but I'm not complaining. um, that means that kind of chapter is, I can now
close.
say, is closed. And maybe that's why I feel like okay to sit and have this conversation now, because I'm like, that chapter is now closed.
Yeah, it's like you've
Because
come full circle now, and that's finished, that's done with, and that's something that you've obviously learned a massive amount from as well.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think I still learn stuff now. I think I still, like, sometimes I still sit there and I think about, the times like if I do have, because even though I'm stable now, I still have bad mental health days. I think everybody's going to, anyone that suffers with any form of mental health condition, as stable as you want to be, you're going to have times that are bad. You're going to have like things are going to happen, stuff's going to happen in life that's just going to make it bad again. Um, but sometimes I sit there and I think, this. this is okay now. Like I can still handle all of like anything that's going to come my way because it can't be that bad. It will never be as bad as it was.
I was going to ask you, does it make you look at like fear differently now? Like, do you see, okay, yeah, that freaks me out a little bit, but I can handle that.
Yeah.
I mean, I can
Yeah.
handle it. I can deal with anything that life wants to throw at me now because I know what I've been through in my past and I know how strong I am.
Yeah, 100%. Like, the only thing that I still can't handle and the only thing that completely spins me out, and it's something that I'm still working on, is when I have issues around money. That's something that still will spin me out to this day, and I'll just completely lose it. And I don't know what I'm doing with my life. And then I phone my mum crying, and I'm like, I can't cope. But anything else that comes my way, I'm totally okay with. I can handle it. I'll have my
Yeah,
time where I'll freak out, I'll have a cry, and then I get my solution head on and go, it's scary. We've got to deal with it, but this is how we're going to deal with it. It's, and again, potentially stories for another time, but obviously we were made homeless at the beginning of last year. And I just had Grace come back, and Darcy was only just one, and then I was made homeless. Like that would have completely thrown old Charlotte under a bus, and I would have used everything I could to numb how I was feeling. But instead, I got upset, I got mad, and then I got a plan. Became like solution orientated when it comes to massive things that come my way. And I think that's what I've got from the recovery process, is becoming solution orientated to big,
that's really
crazy
good.
things. Um, and that's like, yeah, now anything like that happens, it can't ever be that bad. It can't be as bad as all of the stuff that happened when I was younger, or the recovery and the mental health process and journey that I've been on. Like nothing will ever be that bad. So yeah, so to kind of like close off this conversation, I'm hoping that this has given insight into, a little bit more about me, which is quite nice. Like, obviously, not sounding self-centered, but it's nice to like be able to share. But I'm really hoping that it's been able to give some people a bit of like hope in the most uncheesy way, of saying that you're not the only person that's going through this kind of stuff. You're not alone in this situation, and it does get better. The the kind of harsh reality of it is, though, you are the only person that can do this for yourself. And this is where I have to kind of rein myself in a little bit without sounding like I'm going to get on a soapbox and get preachy. But it is all very much down to, if you want to come out of, and this kind of goes for everything, but obviously what we're talking about with the whole addiction thing is, if you want to get through addiction and push through that, like that fear, you have to get really, really real with yourself. You have to really sit there and go, I need to do this. I want to do this. Because there's also a difference between needing to do something and actually wanting to do it. Because if you don't want to stop using drugs or alcohol or whatever it is as your kind of crutch to get through daily life, then you're not going to. If you don't want to do it, it's simple as that. Like I need to lose weight, but I want to eat chocolate. So, I have this thing
With you
where,
there.
like I know I need to lose weight, but I don't want to give up all the bad stuff. So if you want to get clean and sober, it is 100% possible, but you have to actually want to do it. So you can't sit there in your like victim mentality of, oh, my life has been so bad and this, and this has happened. So I have to take the drugs to feel normal, or I have to take the drugs to stop this feeling, or I have to drink a liter of vodka because it makes me feel better and it makes me be able to cope with everything I've been through. Because everything you've been through will always be everything you've been through, but you can either use it as the excuse to destroy your life, or use it as the foundations and the stepping stones to build a better one, so that you can look back and go, that was my life, but this is now my life. But that's all a mindset thing. And I think if you're in a position now where you're sat listening to this, podcast thinking, I really, really do want to get clean. I really want to turn my life around. Like, I'm going to tell you, you absolutely can, but it is going to suck to begin with. It's going to be really hard, but you can use all of like everything you've been through can be used as like fuel to be able to rebuild everything.
Yeah, I like that. Everything you've been through will always be everything you've been through. Such a good saying.
It's, it because it will, like, nothing's going to
Yeah,
change the past. I can't change what happened all those years ago. I can't go back and be a different person. But what you can do is you can be a different version of yourself in the future. And that's what you have full control over. And that is 100% down to you. And this is where I do tend to like have upset people in the past by just being like, but it's completely your control. It doesn't matter what happened to you. It doesn't matter what conditions you now have, what mental health you face, what issues you deal with on a daily basis. If you want to change your life, you absolutely can. And nobody is going to do it for you. Like nobody's coming to rescue you at the end of the day. Like,
yeah,
if you don't like something about your life, change it. And it will be hard and it will take a lot of work. Like, if I'm really honest, my recovery's probably been like the entirety of this 15 years since I stopped doing drugs. Like, I still, even now, have to manage the fact that I used to be an addict to the point where I don't take painkillers unless I absolutely have to, because I
yeah,
can't run the risk of feeling good again on something that isn't, good for my body.
yeah,
And, that was something that came years and years after I stopped doing drugs. I used to be like, oh, well, it's only paracetamol. Oh, it's cocodamol. It's fine. The doctor gave it to me. I can take it. Like, I did my back in and they gave me tramadol. That was the stupidest thing they could have ever done. But
yeah,
I was like, well, the doctor gave it to me, so it's totally fine. And that's only been something over the last kind of like 6 or 7 years, maybe, that I've been like, actually, no, you can't take anything because you can't
yeah.
run that risk. So,
You can't take that chance.
no. And it's going to be a daily thing, it's going to be a daily struggle, but it will get better. Every single day gets easier.
That's
Every,
something I'm told a lot is once an addict, always an addict. And it's
yeah,
always something that you have to, keep in
manage.
mind.
Yeah, 100%. And like, I'm not saying that I'll fly off the deep end and go and, like pick up class A's again. Like, I would never ever do that. Like, nothing, I don't think anything could happen in my life that would ever make me do that again. But I still have to be like, I just have to be a bit cautious because I also have an incredibly addictive personality in general.
Yeah,
So anything I can become quite addicted to quite quickly. So I have to, you just have to manage it. And it is going to be a lifetime commitment, but it's a lifetime commitment to you and your happiness. And at the end of the day, we are the most important people in our world because we are our world. Like,
yeah,
our whole world starts with us and we are the center of it. So, as horrible and as hard as it's going to be, and as scary as it probably feels, if you're sat there now thinking like, yeah, actually a lot of what she said makes sense. Maybe I am fully addicted to X, Y, and Z. And it sounds really scary to be like, what would I do without it? But trust me, you'll thank yourself in the long run. You will 100% thank yourself for it.
yeah, yeah.
So,
When you
yeah,
step through the fear.
exactly. And as much as it does seem really scary, and that was obviously the whole topic of this podcast came out, was talking about pushing through the fear. And as like, there was a book that I was given, and I'm going to try not to tangent too much. There was a book I was given by a lady I used to work with, and it's called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And
Yeah,
it's like a self-help book, but it's all about facing your fears and doing it scared and just being like, I don't know how to do it. I don't have a roadmap for it. I don't know what I'm doing in life, but I'm going to do it anyway because I know that this is for the best. like the outcome, the other side of fear is always peace.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what everybody wants.
Yeah, that's very, very true.
And so I hope this has been helpful.
It's
Um,
been really interesting. I really enjoyed listening to you speak today.
and I feel like it feels really good to be able to actually have this conversation. I'm very open, as I've said before, with my friends and my family, and on my social media, I've been very open about my past, but this is such a public platform. So I was really nervous to actually do it, but I'm really, really hoping that it's gonna resonate with somebody and eventually be able to help somebody, even if it just helps
Yes.
one person be like, do you know what, I'm just going to do it, I'm going to feel the fear and do it anyway and come out the other side, then I will be very happy.
Job well done.
Exactly, exactly. So but yeah, thank you very much for letting me ramble on this podcast.
Thank you so much for speaking. It was a pleasure listening to you tonight.
Thank you. So yeah, and hopefully, if anyone does have any feedback, as we always say, like we really, really appreciate feedback. And also, if you have any like questions, feel free to send them in my direction because I'm more than happy to help. If you're on a recovery journey and you need support, then I'm here for that too. Like I'm here to help because I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt. So let me see if I can help you.